All right, how many of you have heard of Fusion Tables before? All right, good. For those of you who haven't, Fusion Tables is a modern data management and publishing application. It's a spatially aware database that is totally running in Google's cloud. So what does that mean? It looks and feels like a spreadsheet, but it runs completely in a web browser. So you don't need any third-party plugins or additional software or add-ons, and you don't need any on-premise hardware. If you can get to a web browser on a device, you can use Fusion Tables. So the example I'm going to show you here is kind of neat. In this example, I went out to the USGS website and I downloaded all the earthquakes that had happened since 1973 that had a magnitude of 4.5 or greater. So it was a pretty large data set. As you see in the right-hand corner here, it's a data set of about 175,000 different rows. So what's neat about Fusion Tables is that with the click of a button, I can interact with all 175,000 pieces of that data in a table, as you see here, or in a chart, in a timeline, or kind of more relevant to our discussions is in a map. So what you're seeing here is all 175,000 points plotted on a Google map. And what's really neat is with the click of a button, I can turn it into kind of a heat map. So we can do some kind of density mapping of all of those points. And the real power in Fusion Tables is that you can take disparate tables and mash them up. So that table that showed us the occurrences of earthquakes is even more relevant when we mash it up with another table that has the location of nuclear power plants in the world. And so, you know, in a pretty short amount of time, you can get an understanding of where these nuclear power plants are in regards to known seismic activity. So it's the type of stuff that analysts and specifically GIS analysts have been performing for many years. But what Fusion Tables has done is it's lowered the threshold by which you can kind of enter into this ecosystem. And so now anyone, whether that be a high school student, a middle school student, or a researcher, has access to these tools and can display that data. It's good with not just point data, but it's also good with lines and polygons. So this example here I'm going to show you is all the parcels in Missoula County in Montana. Again, it was a publicly available data set. I ingested into Fusion Tables. So in this case, it's 48,000 rows of data. And then I have the ability to style it. So here it's in a Google map, and you see I've done some styling where I've made the roads purple, the public lands green, and then each individual parcel is marked in kind of orange and gray. So again, a really cool way to add context to tabular information. So this is the front end to Fusion Tables, right? It's this interface that you see here, but as with many Google products, we provide what's called an application programming interface, or an API. That is to say, we extend the functionality of the application beyond just what you see here. And so if you have a program, if you have a smart programmer working with you, they can leverage this tool inside of your existing applications. What I mean by that is, for instance, I found that the city of Seattle puts out all of their 911 data. So every 30 seconds, they do a dump of all their 911 calls out to a website. It's handy to look at it on a website, but again, it's a lot of data. It's thousands of calls a day. It's a lot of stuff. And so with just a few lines of code, what I'm able to do is point Fusion Tables out to that website to scrape all of that data and ingest it into Fusion Tables in a tabular format. And so now what's neat is I can create a dashboard off of all of this information. So what you're seeing here is an example of what I've done with Fusion Tables. Oh, that's not supposed to look like that. There we go. And so now you're seeing all of those calls plotted on a map. And you're also seeing them put out as a chart. So we can see that a full 64% of the calls in the last week have all been just for aid and response. 14.5% of those calls have been for automated fire alarms. So really neat way to add context to data. And I didn't have to generate these charts. I didn't have to generate this map. This is all being generated and dynamically put together on the fly. One thing I didn't show with the earthquakes, and I'll try to show you here, is there's also some really powerful filtering capabilities in Fusion Tables. So if, for instance, I want to see only out of those 175,000 earthquakes, if I only want to see earthquakes that have happened since the year 2000, I can do that. And we'll see what our data set looks like here. It's filtering through. So that gets me down to 64,000 records, and then maybe I just want to see those that have had a magnitude of 6.0 or greater. And so I can create these cascading rules to really narrow down the data set. And again, this is the stuff you've been able to do in a statistics package like SPSS or Microsoft Access for a long time. But here, again, we've lowered the threshold that anybody can do this from a web browser, and you could even do it from your mobile phone. So So when we apply this, we get a data set of 100 and it's not working. Oh well, when the demo doesn't work, move on to the next one. That's what I say. Okay, so one other thing I mentioned to you, it's a spatially aware database. What does that mean? That means that we can query the data, not just on its parameters, but we can pass it a latitude and longitude, we can pass it a shape, and we can find out how many rows in that database correspond to whatever geospatial feature we pass. So let me demonstrate that. What I did is I took a file that had all the airfields in the world, 10,000 different airports, military, civilian, general aviation, 10,000 different airfields, and I put it up into Fusion tables. Now, if I tried to just bring this data into Google Earth and look at it, Google Earth would get a little choppy. 10,000 items is a lot to look at. It actually exceeds our human factors ability to actually, we can't actually interact with 10,000 rows of data. So what I do here is kind of neat is I interface Google Earth with Fusion tables, and so this is a full Google Earth environment. You'll see here I can do 3D and 2D. It's all in a web browser. But what it's doing in the background is it's dynamically querying that Fusion table with the airfields to only show me those airfields that are in my field of view at this time. So as opposed to loading 10,000 of them, as you see in the lower left-hand corner here, I only loaded 7. And as I move this screen around, and you'll see that they're dynamically reloading. So here there's just the 6 I'm looking at, and if we head off over toward California here, or out in like Apache country, there's nothing there. There we go. So, here's 15. And you can also do this. There you go. Now I have 41 results in my field of view. Again, it's easier than loading 10,000. And you can also do this kind of in the third dimension as well. So it'll take a second, but there now we've got 309 in our field of view. So Fusion Tables is a very flexible, very dynamic platform. I encourage you to point your pre-service teachers to it. Let them check it out. It has exceeded all expectations for, when kind of Google put this tool out, people have used it in ways you couldn't even imagine. I noticed the Guardian website the other day was in real time uploading 911 calls from the riots in London. Just a really cool way for them to push all of this data into the cloud where anybody can interact with it. So, yes, we have time for a couple questions.
Do you have to, what are the parameters in the table? Do you have to have that log?
You don't. So what you'll notice is, yeah, this one doesn't. So in my 911 example, we do what's called geocoding. So we use the Google Maps API, which is to say that you can pass it dynamically in the table an address, a zip code, a state, a city, and it will create the latitude and longitude from there. If you have a latitude and longitude, that'll work too. Sir.
I guess what do you look for when you're looking for data tables? I mean, if you're interested in something, you find some data and say, okay, well, this is maybe interesting, but you can't go into this tool, and then another one you say, okay, well, this one is already formatted correctly.
Sure. So good question. The question was kind of on-ramping. How do you get your data into Fusion Tables, or what would you decide is the right data set to bring into Fusion Tables? I will say that one neat thing about Fusion Tables is that there's literally hundreds of thousands of public tables. So other people have taken data and pushed it into Fusion Tables. So if you want to start with the 2010 census data, that's already up there. There's just lots of opportunity. But if you had a data set, you could upload it as a shapefile, you could upload it as a CSV. If it's in a spreadsheet or if it's in an existing kind of database, there's an on-ramp to get it into Fusion Tables. So, and there's lots of tutorials and resources out on the web. If you just search on the Fusion Tables website, so just search Fusion Tables in Google and it'll take you right here. Any other questions? All right, I appreciate your time.